and welcome. You're watching NewsX and I'm Megha Sharma. America has gone ahead with its 50% tariffs on Indian exports, putting pressure on India's export-driven industries. With India's total exports to US measuring at around $86.5 billion, goods about $60.2 billion worth will now face 50% tariffs, making affected sectors fall by almost 70%. The American market itself will also be impacted, with consumers bearing the brunt as tariffs on exports cause goods to become more expensive. In fact, analysts have estimated that the US consumers, who had till now absorbed 22% of the tariff costs through June, will be bearing the brunt of 67%. With over 40 countries being impacted by Trump's tariff tantrums, let's take a look at how the world is reacting to the same. Joining me on the telecast are my panelists. I start first with Raymond Vickery. He is the former US Assistant Secretary of Commerce. He's joining me from Washington, D.C. Mr. Vickery, thank you very much. And of course, my first question, how is the average American reacting to the tariffs that have been imposed on countries all across the globe, and particularly the 50% tariffs that come into effect today? Is the average American impacted, or does he not care?
Well, thanks very much for having me. It's absolutely the case that cooperation between the two largest democracies in the world, India and the United States, is necessary for peace and prosperity throughout the world. That having been said, it is absolutely necessary that those in India and the rest of the world realize that Donald Trump is not the United States of America. He ran on a proposition of lowering inflation and creating greater prosperity here. The actions that he's taking in regard to tariffs, particularly on India and Brazil, where he has combined political objectives with his own mistaken views of the world economy, are leading the United States in exactly the wrong direction. Inflation has not come down. The employment figures last month were bad, and so President Trump tried to create a new reality by saying that those figures were wrong and firing the person who had brought him the news about the bad impact of these kinds of tariffs on employment. So this is a very difficult time in the United States. I must say that in regard to India, it is not foremost in the public consciousness here. We're dealing with National Guard armed troops on the streets of Washington, D.C. We're dealing with attacks on the media. We're dealing with attacks on some of the greatest universities in the world. The threats against the Federal Reserve and that effect on the stock market are all domestic concerns. Nevertheless, there is a growing perception that this view of my way or the highway, a transactional approach of real estate developer, is not in the interest of the average man and woman in the United States.
Right. You spoke about how Trump has been using these tariffs as political tools to fulfill his political objectives as well. His foreign policy at this point of time being diametrically opposite to what he was preaching and also practicing during his first term, but even during the campaigning period. I think the beginning of the term saw India and America in a very close relationship. In fact, we were on the verge of signing the bilateral trade agreement. So what has gone wrong, according to you, in the span of these 3 to 4 months that has pushed Donald Trump to do a complete turnaround, and the bully that he is, you already mentioned about it, to force it down on India, for him to make decisions on India's behalf with regards to whom we need to be talking to, whom we need to be extending our friendship and bilateral relations with, whom to be purchasing our goods and importing oil and gas from?
Well, you're absolutely right. You know, I've devoted the last 30 years of my professional life trying to bring reconciliation between the United States and India to move us from estrangement to actually being partners in fighting for peace and prosperity. What has changed is that unfortunately we now have a president uh, who views the world in terms of his own self aggrandizement, that he is the great man, that he decides and makes reality bend to his will. I think it was particularly galling to him when India spoke up after the surgical strikes against Pakistan centers of terrorism. When India said yes, it had acted on its own and didn't give full credit to Donald Trump and no, nominate him for a Nobel Peace Prize as others had done. It's all about his own ego. There have been neurologists here who have diagnosed him clinically as having a narcissistic mania. And I think that if you want to understand what the difference is, that's primarily it.
Yeah.
Also, he has started to listen even more closely to fringe people like Peter Navarro, his economic advisor, Stephen Miller, who have fed his sense of ego, and their views in terms of international relations are diametrically opposed to the kind of cooperation between the U.S. and India necessary to build peace and prosperity. I
Right.
have every hope
Right.
that we'll be able to correct this at the midterms.
Okay. All right. Uh, Stay on with me, Mr. Vikri. I'm also being joined by Keith Vaz, the former minister in the UK government. He is joining me from London. Mr. Vaz, the situation such as this, where it becomes imperative for countries of the global south, and not just global south, in the west as well, there is quite the upheaval in European Union, in United Kingdom. There is a need to look for alternative markets, countries that are going to work with each other with mutual interest kept in mind. Do you think Trump has unconsciously or subconsciously set the ball rolling to isolate America from the rest of the world?
Good afternoon from London. This is a terrible development for international and world trade. It is a ridiculous set of decisions that have been made by the American government, because the people who will be hurt are the American people. If they still want to buy goods from India, they will be paying much more money. India will be harmed because, of course, jobs will be put at stake. So there are no winners from the decision taken by Donald Trump. Everyone will be a loser, including, and in my view, especially the American economy. And a trade negotiation and relationship that's worth 87 billion, with key sectors such as pharmaceuticals being affected, 8 billion in bilateral trade as far as pharmaceuticals is concerned. These are very, very worrying figures indeed. And weaponizing trade in this way is a dreadful thing to do, because jobs are at stakes, the livelihoods of people, and the future of the world economy. So everyone loses. And that is why I think what would be helpful is to have another WTO bring forward the discussions that are going to take place in the Cameroon, and a country take the lead in bringing together all those countries that are affected by this. You simply cannot weaponize trade in this way. all that it will do is cause hardship and cause misery to people all over the world.
But you see, there are countries like South Korea, and you see Japan, and to quite a certain level, Canada, United Kingdom, succumbing to the bullying tactics of Donald Trump, who has used tariffs as a means to achieve his means. We saw the South Korean president who had met Trump at the White House, and he was appeasing him to the extent that he said, the next time you're in North America and you're building your Trump towers in North America and hobnobbing with Kim Jong-un, he will perhaps even participate and be part of that meeting. This is the level of appeasement that these leaders are doing, just to keep Trump in a good mood, so that he just does not start imposing 20%, 30%, 40% tariffs on them. But
yes.
How justified is it?
In fact, the only thing the South Korean president didn't do is what he did with Joe Biden, which was to sing a song. You're absolutely right. There has been tremendous appeasement. Somebody has sent round a briefing note to all these countries to say, if you flatter Donald Trump, if you nominate him for the Nobel Prize, if you're very nice to him, if you wear a suit and a tie at the White House, then your tariffs will go down. But if he can treat a country like India, and there was a special relationship between Donald Trump and Narendra Modi, if you can treat a country like India with such disrespect on something spurious such as Russian oil. Look, the President of the United States welcomed Vladimir Putin to Alaska and applauded him as he walked on the red carpet and treated him with such respect, but no other country in the world is allowed to do that. This is ridiculous. This is not diplomacy. This is sheer, ridiculousness.
Yeah.
And I don't think that the world economy can survive much of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody has to take a grip. And the only people to take a grip, I think, is those who host the next WTO. They're the people who should be calling a meeting together.
Okay. Stay on with me, Keith Vaz. I'm also being joined by David K. Johnson. He is an American celebrated author. He's joining me from New York. David, what's your opinion in wake of what's been going on, everything that is revolving around Trump? And this is exactly how he likes it. He enjoys all the attention. He likes drama, theatrics, and he's full of it. And the world seems to be revolving around him. Somehow India is not taking the bait. India has not been following his terms and conditions, and therefore a penalty, a sanction on India of 50%. Do you think? I think China is another country that has taken the U.S. administration led by Donald Trump head on. Perhaps China is the only country that, and then of course Russia as well, that Trump has not been able to bully. And how do you think things are going to move forward in terms of stabilizing a very delicate position that the American economy is soon going to be because of the unleashing of the tariffs?
So, Meiji, there are two fundamental issues here. The first is Donald Trump has no power under the Constitution, except in very, very limited small circumstances, to impose a tariff. We literally overthrew our government in the 1780s and created the Constitution specifically to give our Congress, not the executive, not the president, but our Congress, the sole power to tax. And tariffs are a form of tax, and they're listed under duties in the Constitution. Secondly, as I've been trying to get people to understand for most of the 37 years that I've known Donald and written books about him, covered him very closely, he is appallingly ignorant. He doesn't know anything. He did not know what happened on December 7th, 1941 at Pearl Harbor. He thought Frederick Douglass, who died more than about 130 years ago, was still alive. He is a con artist, and he has gotten where he is by making claims that aren't sufficiently challenged by journalists and political opponents. And he simply does whatever he thinks is in his interest as Ray Vickery, a very seasoned trade diplomat, explained. He also has declared himself to be our dictator. In fact, literally yesterday, he said, you know, a lot of people are saying it'd be really good to have a dictator. I don't know anybody who is saying that, but I'm sure there's somebody, but it is not the popular will, and it's not his duty to be the dictator. But I've been warning people since at least 2011 that if Donald Trump got to the White House, his goal would be to have absolute power as America's first dictator. And lo and behold, on February 26th of this year, 5 weeks after resuming office, Trump declared himself to be our dictator in a statement that he posted and then follow-up statements by the White House. So the solution to this is that the Republicans in Congress who have surrendered all of their principles about trade, economics, individual liberty, standing up to dictators like Vladimir Putin, some of them are going to have to break away from Donald Trump, or as both Ray Vickery and Keith Vaz noted, the economy has to go down, prices have to go up. Tariffs, as effectively a retail sales tax, mean higher prices, and they don't mean it just for imported goods from India. If you make a competing product in America, you are going to raise your prices to just below the price of the tariffed good. Mm-hmm. This is really a scheme to help Trump's friends who own the means of production increase their wealth by draining it from other people. So right. The solution here, the World Trade Organization would be helpful, but it's the U.S. Congress and specifically Republicans that are at the forefront of what needs to be done to stop these illegal actions, unconstitutional actions, and dictatorial behavior.
Right. I do want to understand from you, what is your perception of this increased coziness of Donald Trump with the Pakistani leadership? The fact that it was shocking behavior that an American president has laid out the red carpet and is having lunch with the self-appointed dictator of a terror state, Pakistan. I'm talking about Asim Munir.
Well, it's very surprising, but it's also indicative of Donald's complete and appalling ignorance. If you were to ask Donald Trump what's the difference between a Shia and a Sunni, he wouldn't know. Now, I don't expect average people to know that, but the President of the United States damn well better know it and know why it matters. He doesn't. He doesn't know anything. So, and remember, Donald admires absolute dictators. He thinks he should be able to have people shot. He thinks that when he walks into a room, when he appears anywhere, he is to be applauded. He stood on the red carpet where American soldiers got on their hands and knees to lay it out and applauded Vladimir Putin, who had to have the meeting in Alaska because he is under an international arrest warrant as a suspected war criminal, an indicted war criminal. So Donald, you can't assume some pattern or logic to what he's doing and why suddenly, after all of his anti-Muslim rhetoric, he is drawing himself close to the dictator in Pakistan. He will do whatever he thinks is in the moment to his advantage, and he has no underlying principles. He has no underlying knowledge. He has no philosophy except me, and I'm special. I'm the only person who should be president, and in fact, I should be dictator of the entire planet. And he's virtually said those exact words earlier this year to journalists from the Atlantic magazine.
Right. Okay, all right. Let's also get in Quinton Hitchcock. He's an American political consultant. He's joining me from Houston in Texas. Quinton, I do want to understand from you. Just yesterday, there was a statement that was made by Donald Trump. He's welcomed these hundreds and thousands of Chinese students who had just a few months ago had been barred to study in American universities. I think China is the only country that Trump has not been able to bully successfully. In fact, there has been an additional 90-day reprieve that has been given to China. How difficult is it going to be for America to strike any sort of trade deal with China? And how reliant and dependent is America really on Chinese imports?
Well, it's going to be incredibly difficult. And for the record, the president and his administration got criticized by far-right conservative news for allowing that many Chinese nationals to enter our higher education system. So let's be very clear on that. But listen, the president clearly feels like he has some type of leverage over other countries. And that doesn't appear to be the case with China. So I think any economic deal that we have with China or don't have with them moving forward is going to be very difficult for the United States to come to agreements with. I think I'll just add really quick that what's so disappointing about what's going on between the US and India right now is the incredible economic opportunity that we have before the two countries. I think earlier this year in February, both countries announced a $500 billion trade deal by 2020 or 2030. So that because of that, that's incredibly concerning. I think the president or somebody in his administration is aware of how foolish this is if we continue these tariff talks with India specifically. So I'm hoping that this is something that goes away very soon, but anything with China is going to be extraordinarily more difficult than other countries.
Yes, and talking about how China stands up to the bullying tactics of Donald Trump, there is the SEO summit that is taking place. It is much anticipated. India is participating, so is the Russian President Vladimir Putin, who is going to be arriving over there. There are bilaterals that are going to be happening on the sidelines. It's the kind of posturing that China, India and Russia, and along with them the other 7 nations that are participants of the SEO are going to send out in terms of signaling to the world as well as to America. Do you think there is an actual possibility of building a multilateral world that will not have the requirement of an America dictating the terms?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, it's going to be incredibly difficult. And let's also not forget, this gets lost in the media. President Trump has about 3 years left. So we're going to have another president at some point. So it may be a little bit delayed in terms of our the progress that we make with bilateral trade and economic prosperity throughout the world. But yeah, it's going to be difficult. The president sees negotiations very differently than most people. Most people criticize him for that, and I understand it, but he sees the world a different way. And, because of that, the United States is probably going to have some unfavorable trade tactics and bullying tactics that the rest of the world doesn't like. But the American people are very split right now politically and ideologically. I don't think this country has ever been further apart than it is today. And that's something that the rest of the world, I don't think, quite realizes just how bad it is and just how polarizing our country is. So you have half the country that follow him no matter what he does, no matter what he says, they're going to support him 100% of the way. And then you have another part of the country that is not gonna endorse anything he does, no matter what he does. So that's the state of our affairs right now.
Okay, but and also, does the average American care about all these tariffs that are being imposed on all the countries in the world? Also, interestingly, the tariffs, the 50% tariffs that come India's way exclude pharmaceuticals, smartphones, and oil and gas, which are the key components. The large percentage of the imports that come America's way, which are also then, if tariffs are going to heavily impact the daily life of an average American. How is an average American reacting and responding to all these tariff measures?
Well, Mr. Vickery, I think, pointed it out accurately earlier that the average American is not worried about this whatsoever. The average American cares about what are called kitchen table issues. Kitchen table issues meaning what is going to affect their life and their children's life and their bank account. What is going to affect those things directly? A lot of that's domestic policy. A lot of that is social, the social temperature in this country. To be very honest, and I don't know, this is probably not a great thing, but to be very honest, the vast majority of Americans are either uninformed about this or frankly have no interest in this to begin with. They're worried about domestic issues.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm also being joined by Dr. Satoru Nagao. He's a fellow Hudson He's a fellow at the Hudson Institute. He's joining me from Tokyo. Thank you, Dr. Nagao. And of course, the first question, there has been very recently a meeting that has been held between the heads of states of South Korea and Japan. There are trade negotiations that are hectically being played out in the economic arena between both the countries. Not just that, the Indian Prime Minister is also going to be visiting Japan in just a few days' time before he heads to Beijing on 31st of August. Do you think trade is the focus area of all these leaders congregating in face of the heavy tariffs that have been imposed on each of the countries?
Yes, India and Japan is very important. That's why this is a different issue and it's very important. And that's why Japan want to cooperate with India. This issue is one thing. About negotiation style of the Trump administration, especially President Trump himself, is he loves bilateral negotiation to deal by using the intimidation. So that's why when he tried to use intimidation, this is maybe looks like surprise attack, unexpected, and everyone upset. What happened towards Japan, what happened towards South Korea, what happened to other countries who have already agreed with the United States face a similar situation. So when we hear the intimidation, we are surprised and upset. But at the same time, after deal has happened, we nearly forget because Trump himself forgot about his remark. For example, one of the typical example is when he talked with President Zelensky of Ukraine, just before it, he said Zelensky is a dictator or something like that. But the next day, journalists asked him about this remark. He said, "Did I say that? I do not think so." Something like that. So that's why contents of the intimidation itself is not so important. In case of Japan, Trump said, there is no US car to run in Japan. Well, some car is running, that's true. But anyway, this is not matter. Then Japan should buy rice from the United States, he said. But when we check the deal, yes, Japan will import some more rice, that's true, but only few more. That's all. So rice is not the main point in this case. So intimidation itself, meaningless. We do not need to care about this. The intimidation is Trump want to make pressure to deal. That is the only message. Content is not matter. So this time 50%, yes, that's not good, I think. But at the same time, this is also the intimidation. It will not main point of the India-US relation, I think.
Yes, you did mention, I think the areas of convergence where there are common issues, whether we talk about South Korea or Japan or India as well, that there is a need to protect the agricultural and the fisheries sector of each of the countries. That had also been the protest that had been raised by Japan and South Korea, and grudgingly accepted the deal that was signed between US and Japan. And of course, South Korea at this point of time also hoping to sign that trade deal with the US administration and hoping those trade tariffs come down further low. But Trump does not seem to be in a mind space to do that with South Korea at this point of time. How important does it become, and how helpful can India and Japan and India and South Korea and other nations in East Asia and Southeast Asia come together to build resilient supply chains so that there is no dependency, complete dependency on American economy?
We start to understand the age of the global free trade is end already. So now is the time of the international trade with tariff, and the deal is the matter. So that's why Japan tried to adjust the situation. Japan needs the United States, US market. President Trump proved it, because without the US market, Japan cannot continue the economic development. We know that. That's why we accept the tariff. To deal with President Trump, we use many methods, increasing the investment, accepting the US agriculture product at least some. But we also need to protect our agriculture sector. That's why deal is matter. Increasing investment instead of accepting the huge amount of the agriculture product is Japan's choice. So how to negotiate is a matter in this case. Indian style negotiation is time is not so important because in India many negotiations happen and skill is very high. But at the same time, this is not the US style. That's why the US seeks a short-term gain, but India seeks a long-term gain. So a little bit different style. That's why the view from this gap, something conflict has happened just now. But at the same time, in the long run, the US-India solve this issue, I believe, because India's skill is very high. Thank you.
All right. Okay, I thank you, Dr. Shoturo Nagao, for joining me and my other panelists, Mr. Vikri. I also have with me, of course, other panelists, including David K. Johnson, Keith Vaz, Quinton Hitchcock. Thank you all for joining me, sharing your views. We'll keep a close eye on all these developments and how India can offset these losses and help support the MSME sector that has particularly been hit in the short term by the Trump tariff. Stay tuned on NewsX for more news and updates. Thanks for watching.